Mangalore International Airport is built on top of a hill, featuring what is known as a tabletop runway. The landing strip is narrow, just 150 meters wide, and at both ends, the ground drops away into steep 250-foot cliffs. Overrunning the paved surface here results in a catastrophic fall off the ledge. To operate in this unforgiving environment, Air India Express used a nearly new Boeing 737-800, specifically equipped with a short-field performance package. These modifications provided the aerodynamic capabilities necessary to land on the tight, constrained runways common in this region. In command of this aircraft was 55-year-old Captain Zlatko Glusika, alongside 40-year-old First Officer Harbinder Aliwalia. Captain Glusika had just returned from a 2-week holiday in Serbia. With his body clock still synchronized to a time zone several hours behind, he was struggling with the effects of a disrupted sleep cycle. He was only flying this route due to a last-minute schedule change, a process the airline managed manually with pen and paper. Because Air India Express lacked a medical officer at Mangalore, the crew was never given a standard pre-flight physical. They simply self-certified their fitness and took command of the flight. The first leg of the journey was uneventful. Late that night at Dubai International Airport, passengers boarded for the 3.5-hour return flight to India. This return leg took place during the window of circadian low, the hours between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. This is the period when human fatigue naturally peaks, leading to slower reaction times and a significant dip in the concentration required for complex operations. Roughly an hour into the flight, the captain leaned back in his seat and fell into a deep sleep. For a significant portion of the cruise, the only sound captured by the cockpit voice recorder was his heavy snoring. This left First Officer Aliwalia to manage the aircraft entirely alone. He was forced into double duty, flying the plane, monitoring the instruments, and handling all communications with air traffic control without any support or cross-checking from the captain. Mangalore is classified as a critical airport, meaning airline rules only allow the captain to perform the landing. Yet as the aircraft crossed the Arabian Sea, the safety of 166 people rested on a single pilot who was himself beginning to feel the effects of extreme fatigue. Approaching the Indian coast, the crew faced another complication. Mangalore's area control radar was out of service. Without radar, controllers were forced to use manual procedure control, requiring much larger gaps of time and distance between aircraft to ensure safety. When the first officer requested clearance to descend 130 miles from the airport, ATC denied it. To maintain manual spacing from other traffic, they held the Boeing 737 at its cruising altitude far longer than the ideal flight profile allowed. Airline procedures require an approach briefing to be conducted 150 miles from the destination. Because the captain was asleep, that window closed without a word spoken. The briefing never happened. At 80 miles out, ATC finally cleared the flight to descend. The first officer nudged the captain awake, who found himself behind a rapidly accelerating approach. Groggy, he immediately deployed the speed brakes to force a steep, rushed descent. By skipping the mandatory briefing and starting their descent so late, the crew had lost control of the approach's logic. They were now reacting to the plane rather than staying ahead of it. The aircraft reached the entry point for its final approach at 10,500 feet. At this stage, they should have been at 2,900 feet. They were nearly 1.5 miles too high. This shows the difference between a standard 3-degree glide slope and the path the aircraft actually took. Because they were at such an extreme altitude, the flight instruments latched onto a false radio signal, a technical anomaly known as a phantom 9-degree glide slope. Following this false path, the aircraft aimed its nose downward at a terrifying angle. In an attempt to force the landing, the captain allowed the vertical speed to increase to 4,000 feet per minute, 4 times the normal rate for a stable approach. The first officer warned the approach was unstable, telling the captain the runway was straight down. Despite warnings, the captain disconnected the autopilot and took manual control, determined to land. The crew was now committed to an approach that was mathematically impossible to stabilize, descending toward a short runway at a rate that left no margin for error. The cockpit filled with the sound of automated alarms. The ground proximity warning system began screaming sync rate, followed by repeated commands to pull up as the aircraft dove toward the hill. The captain had fallen into plan continuation bias, a psychological trap where a pilot remains committed to a plan, even when every alarm and external cue indicates that plan is failing. He was locked into the landing, ignoring both the machine and his co-pilot. Flight 812 crossed the runway threshold at 200 feet, rather than the standard 50. It was traveling at 160 knots, well above the target landing speed of 144. The aircraft floated deep into the touchdown zone, burning through precious runway. When the wheels finally hit the tarmac, 5,200 feet of the runway were already behind them. There were only 2,800 feet of concrete left before the cliff's edge. The captain's psychological fixation on the landing had effectively neutralized the aircraft's high-tech safety systems. Realizing they were running out of room, the captain initially applied the brakes and reverse thrusters. The plane began to slow, but with the end of the runway approaching, panic set in. In a fatal split-second decision, the captain stowed the reversers and pushed the throttles forward, attempting to take off again at the very last moment. The engines could not spool up fast enough to provide lift, but the sudden burst of forward thrust canceled out the braking power they desperately needed to stop. The aircraft smashed through the ILS antenna and the boundary fence. With no more runway left, it plunged off the edge of the hill and fell into the dark ravine below. This specific attempt to go around after reverse thrust had been deployed is prohibited by flight rules. It was the final action that made a crash inevitable. In the gorge, local villagers were the first to reach the smoking wreckage. Without equipment or training, they began pulling survivors from the debris minutes before official emergency crews could arrive. While 158 people perished in the disaster, the immediate actions of these villagers saved the 8 survivors. Data from the black boxes revealed that the plane likely would have stopped in the sandy overrun if the captain had simply held the brakes and the reverse thrust. The attempt to take off again was the move that sealed the fate of the flight. Flight 812 is a reminder of the lethal consequences when pilot fatigue, infrastructure failures, and psychological bias converge. It remains one of the clearest examples of how a refusal to abandon a failing plan can lead to catastrophe.